All right, we're up. So we're talking with David Begnaud now of CBS News, talking about his journey in TV, which started in college, right? Didn't you work at a TV station in college?
Yeah, in fact, it started actually a little before that, actually in high school. So my
Nice.
television station, and this would be a good challenge for you, Mr. Kellerman, had
Uh-oh.
a teen report program. So
Oh,
basically what would happen is you would put out this all call to the high schools in the area, who wants to be a teen reporter? So I applied. And so did 25 other people. I think 8, 12 got chosen, and the idea was, hey, you'll do one report a month, maybe every other month, kind of get your feet wet, give you a taste. If you're interested, you can go to school for it. Well, what ended up happening was a lot of people, quite honestly, just wanted to be on television, but when they realized the work that went into it, they kind of had to back out and they weren't available. And so then the station would call and they'd say, hey, can you do another one next weekend? Can you do another one next weekend? And so by the end of my senior year in high school, I was looking at going to Loyola in New Orleans. And I'll never forget, I walked into the office of the vice president of news. And I said, I'm considering going to Loyola or staying at UL Lafayette and dreaming of maybe getting an internship here. I know I'm just coming out of high school. And she said to me, I'll never forget this, go to Loyola and come back with a degree and I'll hire you. And I said, well, what if I go to UL Lafayette instead? And she said, I can't tell you what to do and I can't promise you anything. I chose UL Lafayette. She hired me. And this is what I started doing, Kellerman. I would dub videotapes. You'd see your
nice.
video, you'd call the station and they'd say, hey, can we? I'd say, yes, ma'am, $30. I'll make you a DVD. I'll make you a.
Back then, it probably wasn't a DVD. Yeah.
No, what was it? What do you call it? VCR, right?
Yeah. We don't even remember what it's called.
Exactly. I can't even remember it. So I'd send you a VCR tape and that was it. And then they started putting me on television. Long story short, I would anchor the week. She hired me as the weekend morning anchor before college started. And then my freshman year, she made me the weekend evening anchor. So I would do weekend mornings, weekend evenings on the weekends. And then I'd go to school during the week.
So when I met you in Shreveport, then you had just graduated from college?
Yeah. So I want to say you and I met in Shreveport roundabout, I was there from 05 to 07. You were there.
04 to 06, maybe. Yeah. And so tell me this, because I always remember watching, and David Begnaud is the lead almost every night on KSLA, right? And I mean, you would dig up these stories that no one else had. I mean, no one else would even know about, right? And I think you developed this reputation of like, Begnaud's going to get this story. How do you get to that point? I mean, is it just kind of your passion, your desire for I want to be the lead and this is how I'm going to stand out? I mean, what was your mindset?
Look, it was so two things there. I have been known to drive myself crazy and maybe a few other people in the pursuit of just being on it and wanting to deliver, right? I'm like the kid at the front of the class who wants to please the teacher every day. Not a brown-nosed suck-up, but when you got a news director who's invested in what you want to do, I always wanted to be the guy who wanted to deliver daily. And in the Shreveport market, as you know, there was one night side reporter. I was competing against 2 other people. That was it. We didn't have more than one. It was one. That was it. And so every day I'd come in wanting to be the lead. Not because anybody told me, but because the lead spot was the prime spot. That's where the reporter for that shift went.
Right.
And so I would always want to find something. And listen, my days in Shreveport were actually the toughest of my career because at the network now, I can't tell you the last time I actually chose a story that I did.
Right.
Okay. In Shreveport, they rarely, ever assigned me a story. They would say to me, what are you going to bring? And so I'd wake up and I'd start making calls at 11 and noon. And 1, and I was still making calls at 2 o'clock. And by the time I walked in the 2:30 meeting, I had a couple of ideas, and I knew that I could tiptoe around and maybe not have anything till about 5 or 6 o'clock. And if 6 o'clock came around, I'd have a story. I'd start getting nervous.
Yeah. So talk about that because, a lot of people think, oh, I'm a reporter. I can show up at 9:30 for my meeting or 2:30 for my meeting.
Yep.
I mean, what you just said, illustrates the fact that, as a reporter, especially as you're trying to move up, it's 24/7, is it not?
Well, it's not only 24/7. Okay, yes, but I think social media has completely changed the game as well, because people are beating you when you're sleeping, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
a morning reporter at a competing station who's tweeting out something that's an update to the story you did, but you just wanted to get 5 hours of shut eye
Hmm.
before you woke up and started making more calls. So social media has changed the game, bar none. But
Hmm.
it's also made the game dangerous, because anybody can tweet anything that sounds really salacious, and it has added a layer of fact checking. But the bottom line is, fact checking takes us back to our roots.
Hmm.
Fact checking is nothing to be afraid of. That's what we learned when we got into the business in the beginning, right? So
Right.
if you can stick with the fact checking and not get carried away by the number of retweets or the people who are tweeting with all this hyperbolic language, I think it allows you to stay on track. The key for me was, I'm the kind of person, Austin, where I don't know anything but giving 110%. I'm blessed in that, I'm in a relationship, but I'm not married. I don't have kids. Quite honestly, I don't know how people like you, who have sweet little Kate like you do
Hmm.
and a lovely wife, I don't know how you're able to manage the hours that this business demands.
Hmm.
And for me, it was always, the business is demanding this, but I always had a demand on myself. I was never really competing against anybody else. I felt like I was competing against myself from
Yeah.
last night. I
Yeah.
always want to best myself.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think for different people, it has to be at different levels. There may be reporters who say, I can't go to the network because I don't have the drive, or I can't give 24/7 like you can. But in whatever market they're in, they can still, to your point, compete against themselves to be better each day and better serve that market. Talk to me, if you will. So from KSLA, what's the next progression? And then tell me how you get to, I mean, did you start Newsbreaker or a TV? I mean, tell me about that, because that's a big risk, right? To kind of do something completely different.
So Lafayette, 5 years at KLFY, doing it while I was in college, then went to KSLA. From KSLA, after 2 years in Shreveport, I had two job interest offers. One was at WBTV in Charlotte,
Okay.
and other was at KOVR in Sacramento. And I remember thinking, Austin, they're big decisions, because I had a feeling if I went to KOVR in Sacramento, I would make a West Coast trajectory, which I ended up doing. And
Right.
if I went to ETV, I would kind of cruise up the East Coast. The reason I chose KOVR was because I had it in my brain that an O&O was so exciting to me. I mean, it was just
Hmm.
like, oh wow, an O&O. So
Hmm.
CBS owned the station, but it's still locally run, right? I
Right.
mean, they answer to New York, but you're not working for the network.
Right.
So I chose KOVR, went there, one of the best decisions I made, spent 3 years there, then went to KTLA in Los Angeles, did 2 years there, and I met a woman named Wendy Walker. She had been
Hmm.
Larry King's executive producer for 25 years, and she was starting a show. So at the end of Larry King Live, Larry interviewed what he thought were the five biggest newsmakers in the world. One of them was a man named Carlos Slim, one of the richest men in the world. And when Larry King Live wrapped up, Carlos Slim flew Larry and his wife to Mexico City. And as the story has been told to me, Mr. Slim said to Larry, "You were appointment viewing for my wife and I." And his wife had died recently.
Hmm.
And he said, "I love watching you so much. I would love to help you do something if you want to stay busy." That's how they started Aura TV. It was the digital venture, financially backed by Carlos Slim.
Okay.
Wendy Walker came to me and said, "If I give you the chance, let you hire the staff, bankroll the money for you, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I've always wanted to try a digital operation for breaking news." And that was sort of inspired by, I was one of the lead nighttime reporters at KTLA in Los Angeles. It was me in the helicopter somewhere at 10 o'clock at night. And every night, Austin, it would never fail. Some kid would knock on the van and say, "Hey, did you see this video?"
Hmm.
And I'd say, "Yeah, I saw the video. We're going to have it at 10. But it was 8 o'clock. And the
Right.
kid showed
Yeah.
me the video I was going to have at 10.
Yeah.
So I thought, I wonder if I could do it. I did it. I left KTLA, did it for a year, had a staff of probably, I don't know, biggest, probably 10 people, had a senior producer. I mean, we were jonesing. We made some good inroads in terms of being able to become what I think was a respectable digital operation that fact checked and brought journalistic mindsets to breaking news.
Right. Basically, you went in a direction before the networks did, kind of, just in terms of like, yeah.
I'll never forget, one of the best emails I got was from a buddy of mine whose brother worked at CBS, and he said, if I have to go into another meeting and hear them say newsbreaker tweeted, and so when you hear, you know, it's a stroke to the ego, but at the end of the day, I was missing what I love most, which is live on the scene reporting. So
right.
After a year, I kind of started playing around with going back into television. I spent two weeks working for NewsPath in Los Angeles, and then crossed over to the network, and that's where we are.
So tell me then, you know, for somebody who's watching this, who is in, you know, maybe college or first job or second job, and they look at you and say, man, in what, a period of 10 to 12 years, you know, you get to this point. I mean, what's the advice you have for them? You talked about, you know, giving it 110%, but what else? I just, in listening to you, I presume networking and building relationships is super important.
Well, it's super important, and I you know, you've probably preached this to your staff before, but I learned it firsthand. It's such a small world. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I work with in the network now loop back to some station I've worked at in a small market, right? So for me, that has been key. Advice that I would say. I love this story because Scott Pelley tells it all the time. Scott Pelley was rejected by CBS News, I think, if I remember Scott's story correctly, more than like 4 or 5 times. I think he went at them trying for like 5 years. And Scott Pelley's ratio is you got to be told no 20 times before somebody tells you yes.
Right.
And what I will say to you is, there are some people who will get to the network or whatever level you aspire to be because their dad was Austin Kellerman and knew somebody great, and that helped them get in the door. Or you may be somebody like me whose parents weren't anybody in the broadcast business. I didn't know a soul who even worked in television. My parents didn't know jack about the TV business. And I became sort of a self-made guy, right? And what I loved is that what you want, if you're starting out in this business, is you want your news director to say, that guy, that girl brings something to the table that no one else does. And what I mean by that is, I spent a while, Austin, trying to emulate others until I stopped trying to do that, and I started being the best version of myself. And when I did that, I started like a horse race pulling ahead of the pack. And the reason I did that was not because I got better than anybody else, but it's because I felt comfortable being the honest, true version of myself. And news directors started saying, I don't have anybody else like him in the newsroom. There's not one person like him. And I stopped busying myself trying to be that aspect of her live shot or that part of his writing or that. Just be myself. And it's been one of the best things I've allowed myself to do. That would be some of the advice that I'd give.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time because you are on vacation. Got to tell you a story real quick, though. I'm down in Baton Rouge following the deaths of the police officers there and that horrible shooting that they had. And I'm down there helping our station, right? And, and so we're doing, do our 5 o'clock newscast. And, we had been talking about, nobody's going to be able to talk to the families of these officers because they just aren't going to talk. And then the CBS Evening News cold open hits. And we can see that the officers' wives have been interviewed. And I was like, Begnaud's here. He's got to be in town. And I think I may have sent you a note after that or something. But it's just like, oh, man. So, I mean, yeah, just your ability too. And obviously that's where you're from, your home state or whatever. But to swoop in and connect with people. I mean, when it comes to relationships and talking to people, in their weakest moments into doing stories, what advice do you have for people? Because you've always been so good at that. How do you have those tough conversations with people to get them to trust you and share their story when maybe they just don't want to talk or didn't think they.
I will tell you this because I said it to one of the wives that I interviewed in Baton Rouge, who, by the way, we found out after her husband died, she learned that she was pregnant, and I want to say she may have delivered the child. It was a sweet story in the end, but I remember saying to her when she walked into the police station, and this was we worked on one of the wives said, I will talk to him, only him. And the other wife, it took 72 hours to book. And when she finally walked in the police department, I remember grabbing both of her hands and saying, don't trust me, I'll earn your trust. Because she was afraid, you know, she in that vulnerable moment, what are you going to ask me? Is it going to send me over the edge? That kind of thing. And so she wanted her father and her brother to sit on the side at the interview. And I remember they were sitting so close to me, my knee was knocking their knee. And it was a little uncomfortable because I normally wouldn't allow that to happen. But she was in such a fragile state that saying no might have, you know, lost the interview for us. But in interviews, people have said to me, you seem so empathetic. And it may be a seem factor, but it's also a genuine factor because I'm just damn fascinated with people's stories.
And that's something I think maybe, not to cut you off, but people may, when they meet you, think like, you know, is he being fake right now? But you really, I mean, that's just kind of you, right? I mean,
listen, I love to say it's a Southern thing, right? It's a part of being from the South. We are, you know, we'll welcome you in. We'll ask questions about you that are personal that, you know, some people might back. But again, that goes back to when I felt comfortable being myself. I could go to an interview. I could sense that somebody was kind of like, what is this guy doing? And then I could say what I just said to you, and then they might crack a smile, or they might say, oh, well, that's his personality. That's another example of being that honest version of yourself, right? So with interviews, I will often, you know, most people think, you know, you got to sit up straight and put your shoulder blades against the back of the chair. I might lean in. In fact, probably 90% of the time I lean in. It's not for effect. It's because I'm so I'll tell you another key part of interviewing that I've learned. Sitting there and letting it sizzle. Yeah. Right when somebody says something amazing and you want to come in with the best follow-up anybody's ever thought of, sit there and count to 3. And they will get uncomfortable and they will cry, or they let them be in that moment. One of the best interviews I did recent that's coming to my mind in terms of me appreciating it was with a 15-year-old boy named Cameron Sterling. It was done in Lafayette when his father, Alton Sterling, died at the hands of 2 Baton Rouge police officers. Sure. And that actually was one of the instances that occurred, you may remember, right before those Baton Rouge police officers were killed. When I interviewed Cameron Sterling, he came in, he was shaking. I was unsure about what I wanted to ask him. You don't want to take advantage of a 15-year-old. I mean, this interview could have gone south quickly and it could have made me, it could have been bad. Right. And I asked him a question, Austin, and I think I didn't ask the next follow-up for about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And you sit there and I remember he just kind of swayed back and forth. It was almost like sitting in a church pew. And he just kept going. And what I had to do was just affirm visually with that eye contact that it was all good, that he was in a safe place, and that I was listening, and that what he said mattered. And his attorney said to me after the interview, we coached him for the last hour and a half because he was so nervous and he blew us away. And I think that's what, you know, part of being a good interview is less about what you say and less about what you ask and more about how you act. Right. Because that's sometimes what can draw the best stuff out of people, right? We want great characters. And that's been my experience of getting some of that good stuff out of those great characters. Yeah,
to your point, don't get in the way of the story. Don't try to be that reporter and jump in, let them be themselves. So, well, congratulations on all your success. Hopefully, you know, people who watch this can learn something from it, learn something from your path, and then also your passion, because I think, you know, that's largely a drive for where you are now. So good to connect with you again, man.
Hey, listen, I'm super proud of you. I thought you were a rock star when you were in Shreveport. You're obviously a rock star news director, and I think somewhere at some point, directly or indirectly, I'm gonna be working for you.
Well, we'll see.
Point along the path.
We'll see, right? So, no, good to talk to you, man.
Thanks, bud.
All right, take care.
All right, you too.